Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Ben. How you doing?
Nice to see you and your
Ye-
background in
Yes,
Australia.
yes. Sunny Queensland.
It looks beautiful. I
Yeah.
can't believe your connection is so wonderful.
I know.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Yep. The beauty
So
of Stanley.
so we're going to talk about my favorite subject in the world, which is digestive health, gut
Yeah.
health. And it's not just my favorite subject. It's also very important if you're going to really be involved in the healing process, either as a practitioner, as a distributor, if you're in longevity, or of course as a patient, because everything in the body is derived from what comes into the intestine. And to me, that seems like such common sense, but it's not something we think about. So, Michelle, do you ever think that beautiful face of yours and your hands and your feet and your legs are really the end result of yesterday's lunch?
Oh, yeah.
Right?
The last
I mean,
few decades.
that seems that seems obvious, doesn't it? We are made up of what we eat,
Yep.
and under conditions of the body's construction based on the kind of foods we put inside our digestive system, doesn't it just make sense that if you're not as healthy as you want to be, that it's starting off at the level of the digestive system, because our body is the end result of what we're eating, for better or worse. And given the fact that almost all, likely all of the foods that we eat didn't exist a mere 100 or 150 years ago, and we've got these bodies that are 2 million years old or thereabouts, depending on which form of our evolutionary descendants you consider to be the first, say roughly 2 million years. And we've completely disrupted the food supply over the last 150 years to the point where everything we eat today didn't exist 4 or 5 generations ago. So we're trying to subsist on foods that the body doesn't recognize. Now, if you're eating lettuce and tomatoes and chicken and beef, those are sort of similar to the foods. They're still not the same, because the soils are different and what the animals are eating are different. So they're still not the same. But if you're talking about eating what most of us are eating, the 80% of the standard American diet, and likely down under as well, the caloric composition of the standard American or standard Australian diet, you're looking at ultra processed foods, which themselves are composed of processed individual components. Not only do you have a processed food, you have an ultra processed food, which is made up of processed food. So we've completely distorted the food supply. So of course, there's going to be symptoms that show up in the body. It's just logical to think that, and to not try to address digestive health when you're dealing with chronic degenerative disease, when you're dealing with dementia, autoimmunity, movement disorders, skin problems, cardiovascular disease, cancer, all the many thousands of different diagnoses that the medical model has contributed to us. If you're trying to address those, you got to backtrack to the digestive system. Now, as it turns out, we've all heard of the microbiome. The microbiome is the universe of bacteria that live inside the body. The microbiome lives in the eyes and in the lungs and in the genitals and the female genital system. But of course, most of the microbiome is in the digestive tract, in the intestine. But most of that microbiome, that digestive microbiome, is in the large intestine. So you have two intestines. You got a small intestine, which is where nutrients are absorbed, and the small intestine is where there's food. And as the substance, it's not really food, it's called chyme at that point. As that substance, that chyme substance, which was formerly food, sits in the intestine, nutrients are absorbed through the intestinal wall into the bloodstream, vitamins, minerals, amino acids through the intestine. You don't want to have bacteria in the small intestine because you have nutrients there. So nature has set up a system where most of the bacteria in the microbiome are in the large intestine, not in the small intestine. However, over the course of time, as we eat these ultra processed foods, as we indulge ourselves in lots of sugars, specifically sugars that are called FODMAPs sugars. FODMAPs is an acronym that stands for fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols, which is a fancy way of saying fermentable sugars. Fibers, basically, or soluble fibers that are in eggplant, pears, and apples, and dried fruits, a whole bunch of different food sources, bananas, of these FODMAPs foods. As our diet consists more and more of these FODMAPs foods, as our body becomes more clogged up through poor eating strategies or poor nerve control, and slow down in what's called the migrating motor complex, which is a neuromuscular complex that drives or propels food through the digestive tract. The more we eat, the slower this movement becomes. As the impact of low stomach acid and poor and sluggish bile secretion kick in, eventually bacteria start to accumulate in the small intestine. And then you're in big trouble. Why? Because these bacteria that accumulate in the small intestine, that overgrow, if you will, or hyperproliferate in the small intestine, wreak havoc on the entire body. First of all, remember, you have food and nutrients in the small intestine. So these bacteria in the small intestine have basically an all-you-can-eat buffet, and they proliferate and they grow and they overgrow in the small intestine. Then they start to inflame. These bacteria secrete inflammatory factors. They start to inflame the intestinal lining. And this allows bacteria to not only translocate into the small intestine from the large intestine, but ultimately into the bloodstream. At least particles of these bacteria get into the bloodstream. These particles of bacteria that get into the bloodstream result in a condition called endotoxemia. Emia means blood. Tox means toxin, poison. Endo means inside. Poisons inside the blood. Endotoxemia. And this is what happens when you have a leaky gut following the accumulation of bacteria in the small intestine. What's worse is the bacteria secrete chemicals into the bloodstream, particularly something called histamine, in addition to other chemicals, but histamine is the most famous one. And histamine in the bloodstream can initiate immune reactions and inflammatory reactions, like the bacterial particles that cause the endotoxemia. The bacterial particles, by the way, they call them LPSs. And you can Google all this stuff. You can Google LPS, for example, and Parkinson's disease. You can Google LPS and eczema. You can Google LPS and dementia. You can Google LPS and heart disease or on cardiovascular or cancer or any other health challenge. You can do the same thing with histamine and health challenges. Histamine and skin reactions, histamine and dementia, histamine and cancer, histamine and female reproductive problems. And you'll get all kinds of studies. We know this. Scientists understand this, that histamine from a leaky gut and LPSs from a leaky gut and other bacterial secretions from a leaky gut can result in inflammatory health challenges that lead to chronic degenerative disease, all of them. Then you have cells that sit on the intestinal lining, as well as inside the body in the connective tissue and even in the blood, called mast cells, M-A-S-T. These mast cells are part of the immune system. The white blood cells are part of the body's immune defense system, and they're loaded with histamine, among other inflammatory molecules. And as this immune condition, this hyperimmune condition, this inflammatory condition accumulates and ensues in the bloodstream, these mast cells become activated and they start to explode their histamine. And now you got a whole histamine fireworks cascade in your bloodstream, from histamine from the bacteria, histamine from mast cells, and on top of that, histamine from foods. A lot of foods are histamine containing foods. So you got histamine in the bloodstream due to these excess bacteria. You've got inflammatory factors from bacteria, bacterial particles inside the bloodstream. Long story short, all of this is related to this small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO. Now, these days, doctors have heard of SIBO. 10 years ago, if we talked about SIBO, we would be considered quacks or, new age hippies or, kind of weirdos. People who are alternative, they call them alternative health practitioners or patients who are just like on the internet reading. You ever hear that old saying where the doctor says, "Oh, did you consult Dr. Google on that?" They used to make fun of people when they did their own research. Today, doctors understand that SIBO is a real thing, and leaky gut or intestinal permeability syndrome.
Just on this topic of histamines, if could this problem with the leaky gut make a person hypersensitive to histamines in food? Because I've got a lady who's been told she has to exclude all foods with histamines.
No, she doesn't. And I'll tell you why she doesn't. Okay?
Right.
But let me answer your question first. Yes, this is called histamine intolerance.
Yes.
And that means a little bit. That's why, the immune system is kind of like a straw, like a camel's back. It can handle so much stressors. It can handle so much histamine. It can handle so much toxins. But eventually, one piece of histamine or one piece of toxin is going to break that camel's back. And that's what this intolerance comes from. And this is where a lot of hay fever and pollen reactions and seasonal allergies come from. It's not so much the pollen and the seasonal allergies as much as it's the histamine that's building up in the bloodstream. And then all of a sudden you get a histamine response to some pollen or some hay or some kind of a seed or something that's some kind of dust that's in the air. And you blame the dust that's in the air, not knowing that histamine has been pouring into your bloodstream through a leaky gut for decades. And once you correct the flood of histamine that's getting into the bloodstream through a leaky gut, which we're going to tell you how to do that in a second, you'll be able to go out in springtime without having a runny nose, without sneezing, without having eye problems or teary eyes, runny eyes, or rashes on the skin, or any other of these manifestations of histamine. And the same is true about food reactions. Once you have controlled this leaky gut, you're going to be able to eat foods that you couldn't eat before. So a lot of food reactions are not caused only by the food, but the combination of the food plus the leaky gut that is allowing histamine and other immune factors to get into the blood. So by working at the level of leaky gut, by working at the level of SIBO, you can go a long way towards preventing other things that you would never have thought were associated with your leaky gut, including seasonal allergies. There's some people who can't go out in the sun because they get a sun reaction. They actually will break out in when they go out and get sun. You say, what the heck's that about? That's a classic sign of an overload of histamine. Again, usually coming in from a leaky gut. Some people will go in the shower. Hot water will cause them to get a rash. And that, again, that's a sign of a massive histamine intolerance problem. In fact, there's a condition now called mast cell activation syndrome, or MCAS. And that's when your mast cells are so unstable and so ready to burst because the bloodstream has been pounded with toxicity and allergens for so long through a leaky gut that you react to everything. And I'm in the skin business, you know that. And I talk to people all the time and say, everything I put on my skin makes me break out. Everything gives me rashes. I can't use any skincare products. Everything I put on my skin causes me a problem. Classic sign of histamine and mast cell, and an issue with mast cells, very possibly this MCAS, or mast cell activation syndrome. So that's the bad news. The good news is there's a ton of things you can do. The whole key, and this is for every single chronic degenerative disease, and I want you to understand this. This is for every single chronic degenerative disease, including, by the way, long COVID and chronic Lyme disease. When you have a health challenge that doesn't improve, like long COVID, most people will get COVID or virus, and they'll get better. They'll go through the whole period where their immune system fights it, and you get a runny nose, and you're tired, etc., and then you get better. People with long COVID don't recover. Same thing with people with chronic Lyme disease. You get Lyme disease, you get a bite by a tick, you're supposed to recover, but a lot of people don't recover. That's almost a guarantee. If you're not recovering from a health challenge like a viral infection or a tick bite, in the case of Lyme disease, almost 100% guarantee you're dealing with immune toxicity that's getting in to the bloodstream through a leaky gut, secondary to or following SIBO. There's other things that exacerbate leaky gut, such as fried fats, and also the hormone estrogen can do it. Other inflammatory molecules can cause a leaky gut, but for the most part, it's a SIBO condition. So killing those bacteria is a wonderful health strategy for dealing with all kinds of health challenges upstream. Dementias, movement disorders, cancer, autoimmune disease, heart disease, skin problems, pretty much all of it. Killing those bacteria is a legitimate and important and powerful health strategy for dealing with any long-term chronic disease. And these days, doctors are kind of hip to it. Some doctors, not all doctors, but the newer doctors know, and they'll give you antibiotics because that's what the medical folks do. Well, of course, antibiotics are indiscriminate in the bacteria they kill, and you can make problems worse. You can go from bad to worse by using antibiotics because now you're completely thrown off the microbiome. But there are natural ways that you can kill the bacteria also. For one thing, using stomach acid supplements. And this is one of the roles that stomach acid plays, is to kill bacteria to prevent SIBO or their overgrowth in the small intestine. A lot of people don't make enough stomach acid. One of my favorite longevity products is the Ultimate Enzymes, because they contain not just enzymes, but they also contain something called betaine HCl, which functions kind of like stomach acid. So the HCl is hydrochloride. So using your Ultimate Enzymes can help. Using apple cider vinegar with your meals, or aloe vera or something acidic with your meals can help. Bile has an antibacterial effect. So if you had a gallbladder taken out, or if you have sluggish bile, that can be a problem. Using things like lecithin granules or your Ultimate Enzymes, which actually contain bile salts, the amino acid taurine, the amino acid glycine. These are all very helpful ways to support the bile system, and bile is antibacterial in addition to being detoxifying and helping you process fatty nutrients from foods. Making sure that you're regular, because when you're constipated, the bacteria have an opportunity to proliferate. The food is sitting in the small intestine, so they're going to have a longer opportunity to enjoy their all-you-can-eat buffet. So making sure that you're regular is very important. I like vitamin B1, thiamine, which is found in the Beyond Tangy Tangerine, a great way to improve this what I call the migrating motor complex, these neuromuscular contractions that propel food down the digestive tract through the small intestine and out the body. Very important for people who are dealing with chronic constipation. One of the best ways to deal with chronic constipation is to stop eating. It turns out when we eat, our the movement of food through the digestive tract slows down. Of course, that makes sense because you're trying to get nutrients out of the foods. But if you're eating all the time, you don't give your body a chance to expel the food. The migrating motor complex slows down. And when you stop eating, a lot of times you'll notice that you can hear the migrating motor complex kick in. It has a rumbling sound, which most people, many people, if not all people, think that that's a sign that they're supposed to eat. It's not a sign you're supposed to eat. A rumbling in your tummy is a sign that your body's cleaning itself out and you want to let it do that. But one of the all-time great, these are all great strategies for helping improve SIBO, but one of the all-time great strategies, one more thing, essential oils, oil of peppermint, or tea tree oil, oil of oregano. All of these have antibacterial properties. You can put drops of essential oils, which Youngevity's got some great essential oils, in water and drink them down with your meals or even between your meals to help kill bacteria. But my favorite way to kill bacteria is with a very fascinating product. We got the picture up here. I use this every day. I don't really have a lot of digestive problems. So I want to make sure I don't get them. Can't really see it here, but that's the picture. It's called Hyperimmune Egg. Hyperimmune Egg, or i26, which is the brand name, is really underappreciated longevity product that is super important for SIBO. And I'll tell you how it works. But before I tell you that, if you have a product that's super important or super effective for dealing with SIBO, that means you're going to be able to treat all the other health challenges that come from SIBO. All the ones I just talked about, long COVID, chronic Lyme, dementias, autoimmune disease, all of these will improve when you get rid of those bacteria. You'll improve, you'll reduce the secretions of histamine and LPSs and other inflammatory factors. You'll reduce the leaky gut, or you'll at least slightly, I don't know if you'll completely eliminate leaky gut. There's other things that you have to do, but you'll reduce the impact of leaky gut, all by killing these bacteria. I26 is an egg powder that comes from eggs that come from chickens that were injected with an antigen, which is a bad guy. And in response to that antigen, the chickens make antibodies. This is how the immune system works. You get an antigen, like a bacteria. Antigen is a bad guy, a poison, a toxin, not exactly, but essentially it's a bad guy, a bad molecule that the body doesn't want. And the body makes antibodies. It makes these heat-seeking missiles. We call them immune globulins. If you've heard of IgG and IgE and IgM, these immune globulins are antibodies, and they kill the antigen. They neutralize the antigen like a heat-seeking missile. Today, we can even genetically modify these antibodies and have them target cells of the inflammation system. What do you think happens when you target a cell of the inflammation system? You quiet inflammation. And the latest pharmacology involves drugs called biologics. And here in this country, probably in your country as well, they have commercials almost every break in a show, every 10, 15 minutes, there's a commercial for a biologic. When you see drugs advertised on TV, the vast majority of those drugs are biologics because they're super, super expensive and super profitable. These biologics like Dupixent and Jardiance, and they always have some kind of fancy song they sing, or some, they're bungee jumping while they're doing their Jardiance, or, there's all these marketing techniques associated with these kinds of chemicals because the money is ungodly. The profit margin is so intense. So it's worth it for them to do a big Broadway production commercial and have it run every 20 minutes because they're making so much money on these things. These biologic drugs shoot down cells of the components of the immune system and thereby suppress inflammation. Now, of course, that's not the way you're supposed to suppress inflammation. If you're really interested in health, you're supposed to suppress inflammation by eliminating the problem, which is what I26 does. I26 is egg powder that contains these antibodies that chickens make. And these antibodies are specific for the bacteria, the excess bacteria in the small intestine. They kill the bacteria in the small intestine, specifically the bad bacteria in the small intestine. By killing those bacteria, they immediately improve leaky gut conditions. They immediately reduce the flow of histamine and LPSs and endotoxins into the bloodstream, and they will immediately, or at least over the course of a very short period of time, start to demonstrate or manifest reduction in other symptoms. And in addition to that, because inflammatory factors that get into the blood will also shorten your lifespan, they have longevity promoting benefits as well. They kill the bacteria, they eliminate the toxicity into the bloodstream, they reduce the impact of leaky gut, and you feel better. And they're completely, or it's completely non-toxic except to the bad bacteria. It's non-toxic for us, and it tastes good. I personally like the egg. Some people don't like the taste of egg, but I like the taste of egg. If you put it in your smoothie, they make your smoothie nice and creamy. Egg has a creaming effect on certain proteins, like dairy proteins that are in smoothies, and so it tastes really good on top of everything else. And you get reduction in your SIBO symptoms, which of course improve the symptoms of all other health challenges. And if you don't believe me about the relationship between SIBO and chronic degenerative disease, look it up. There's tons of literature on that.
So what dosage would you recommend for somebody, Ben?
Teaspoon every day. I do a teaspoon every day, but you can do 2 teaspoons every day. Now we have actually I26 in tablets, I heard. I like the powders. The powder gives you a little bit more control over the dose. You can do more or less a little bit more effectively. It's a little bit more cost effective as well. But for traveling, for portability, the tablets are nice. And some people like the taste of the tablets too. I think the tablets, they put a little vanilla in there. They have a kind of...
It's chewables, yes.
A nice taste. Yeah, they're chewables, exactly.
Yeah. So I'd just like to share some results our customers have had. We had one guy who'd had colitis for 7 years, and he started on I26. Within 7 days, all his colitis symptoms were gone, and they have not returned.
That's a really good point.
Yes, he takes it on a regular basis.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. You know, I'm so fascinated with I26 and with digestive health improving other health challenges that I sometimes forget the most obvious thing is that if you have IBS, or you have ulcerative colitis, or you have Crohn's disease, or you have celiac sprue, or you have any other of a host of digestive health problems, intestinal health problems, I26 will help you there too. And by the way, while we're on the subject, if you have an intestinal health problem, you got a food problem. If you have an intestinal health problem, the answer, the solution is not medical. It's lifestyle. It's food, as well as very important nutritional supplements like I26, our ultimate enzymes, our daily digest. Debbie's got a whole bunch of wonderful nutritional supplements. By the way, with bile, we talked about bile earlier, how bile becomes sludgy. Bile is antibacterial, and bile becomes sludgy. It doesn't kill bacteria as effectively, among other things. Dr. Ariaza's liver cleanse is one of the best bile and liver and gallbladder supporting supplements or nutrients or treatments you could ever use. And we don't talk about Dr. Ariaza's liver cleanse. And Dr. Ariaza is an amazing guy. I don't know if you know who he is. He's a spectacular healthcare professional, as well as network marketer and formulator. And his product, Dr. Ariaza's liver cleanse, can also support the digestive system. And that's really one of the coolest things about longevity, Michelle, for me, is it's hyper focus on digestive health. Yeah, we've got cardiovascular supplements and bone and joint supplements and brain and blood sugar supplements. We've got all kinds of supplements, but there's a hyper focus on the digestive tract, and for good reason. Not only is the digestive tract obviously important for the absorption of nutrients, but it's also the source of almost all chronic degenerative diseases. And by working on digestive health, you can improve the symptoms of almost everything.
Yep, that's great.
Thanks, Ben. Get yourself on this stuff. I26, Hyperimmune egg. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you. That's awesome.